Very good morning, dear guys. Welcome to the class. Today, I am going to continue the same story, that is a triumph of surgery. A triumph of surgery. This is a story written by James Herriot, where the speaker is the doctor himself. Okay, here we have seen as the dog became ill, the doctor took it to his surgery and gave treatment. Okay, and here we have seen what kind of treatment he had given to the dog. Yes, he had neither given him single medicine. Yes, instead he gave him plenty of water for 2 days. Besides, the doctor had not given the dog even a small piece of, or what you can say, a little food. Means he had given the dog nothing except the plenty of water. Plenty of water. Okay, for 2 days. And then we have seen how he got progressed in his strength, in his illness. Yes. So here the dog started moving, started playing with the other dogs. He was enjoying squeezing on, yes, or trampled on, then being bowled over. So now the dog had the better time that he had never seen in his or experienced in his life. So the day he had there at the surgery were wonderful for him. The days, जो भी दिन उनके जो वो डॉग के जो भी दिन वहाँ सर्जरी पे थे, these were wonderful for him. But look at the background. The dog was happy here, enjoying his days there at the surgery. But Mrs. Pumphrey, the owner, the mistress of the dog, was in what condition? Let's see. Okay, चलो देखते हैं कि इधर डॉग तो एंजॉय कर रहा था, बट द कंडीशन ऑफ लेडी एट हर हाउस, हाउ शी वाज. Let's see there in the next para. It is given. Look at all the while means while the progress was going on, the dog was enjoying his days. Yes, getting cured. But that time, those days, what happened to Mrs. Pumphrey? Let's see. Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously. Hovered means mandrana. Yes, roam around. Yes, wander. So Mrs. Pumphrey, that in those days, she was just hovering. Yes, roam around anxiously worried. She was so much worried for the dog. And in that anxious means, look at there, it is said Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background. In the background means at her home. For those days, she was so much worried for the dog, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. That means latest news about the dog. She made a dozen calls in a day. एक ही दिन में dozens कॉल करती थी, just to get updated. Okay, से अपने आप को अपडेट करने के लिए, to get the recent news of the dog. She was making a dozen calls in a day. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather. Let's look at how the lady was. She was making call regularly and asking about the cushions, the coat. Means how caring she was. Yes, so much caring towards the dog, or for the dog we can say. So much caring she was. Asking regularly about whether the cushion were changed or not, whether the coats were put on rightly or not according to the weather. She was asking regularly. And here the writer, that means Dr. James Herriot, dodging. He was dodging to the questions. Dodging means चकमा देना. Yes, चकमा देना. उन क्वेश्चंस का आंसर देने के लिए वो निग्लेक्ट करता था और कैसे भी घुमा फिरा कर चकमा देकर निकल जाता था. Whether the questions were changed or not, proper quote were put on or not, means here he was just dodging. उस क्वेश्चंस को बिना आंसर दिए चकमा देने का कोशिश करता था. द राइटर, द जेम्स हेरियोट, द डॉक्टर वी कैन से dodged the questions about whether his questions were being turned regularly or his correct quote one according to the weather. But I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convulsing rapidly. Though the writer was denying or he was just neglecting or dodging to give the answer to the questions, whether the questions were turned or not regularly, whether the correct quote was put on or not according to the weather, but he was answering her, or he was telling that lady that he was out of danger. The dog tricky was out of danger. Besides, he was telling her that he was out of danger and convulsing means recovering rapidly. Yes, so the doctor was, though he was denying to answer these silly questions like whether the questions were changed or not, the proper quote was one or not, but here he was giving the correct information about him to the lady. Yes, proper information. He was getting recovered. He was out of danger, means he was, what you can say, giving her the correct news, right news. Okay, and then look at what happens next. The word convulsing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey, but here, as the writer, as the narrator, the doctor James Herriot told her convulsing rapidly, that means recovering rapidly. So this word, when the writer used this word, means James Herriot, when he used the word to report the lady, she understood something else. And look at what was the effect of that word that had been used by doctor. So look at the word convulsing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. What she understood, the writer James Herriot did not understand, but there he said, as soon as she heard this news, she started sending eggs, dozen eggs, okay, fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, 2 dozen. उसने अंडे भेजना शुरू कर दी, 2 dozen at a time. Yes, fresh eggs. Besides, and for what? To build up Tricky's strength. Tricky की strength build up करने के लिए उसने अंडे भेजना शुरू कर दिया. And then for a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. And look at there, the lady was sending the eggs for the dog, but these eggs were eaten by James Herriot and his partners. So here he says, every day she was sending eggs, 2 dozen eggs at a time. So the people at the surgery were eating all those. They were having 2 eggs per day in breakfast. In breakfast, they were having 2 eggs per people. That means per person, Per person they were having 2 eggs. That means we can say that there were near about 12 people at the surgery. 12 people at the surgery. Yes, and that's why 2 dozens, 24 eggs. Every day she was sending, and the people at the surgery were having them. Yes, and the 2 eggs per person they were having in a breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive later on, look at the first thing she started sending were dozen eggs. Okay, 2 dozen eggs. 2 dozen eggs she started sending, and then she started sending again bottle of wines. Yes, bottles of wine. Yes, so look at the what kind of that lady was, how rich she was. She was giving 2 dozen eggs to her dog. Yes, every day, besides wine of bottle of wine. So, and she started sending all those to the surgery. Yes, so then look at there what happens. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. Yes, when the bottles of wine began to arrive, then the condition, look at actually they were not greedy. The writer, means doctor and other people were not greedy, but look at the condition, the situation changed. The real possibilities of the situation, real possibilities means what would might have happened, what would happen if it had not been stopped. It had not been stopped. What would be the possibilities? क्या possibilities सामने हो सकती है? Here began to dawn on the household. On the household means the people who were there at the surgery. All they started to thinking about the possibilities. Possibilities means when she heard the word that he was getting cured or getting recovered, she started sending eggs. Then she started sending bottles of wine. So here the people at the surgery started thinking what would be the possibilities if he remained there for more days. अगर ये और ज़्यादा दिन अगर यहाँ रहा तो अभी तो वाइन ही आ रही है, फिर और न जाने क्या क्या वो भेजना शुरू कर दे. So here the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn. Yes, अब क्या हो सकता है इसके बाद, ये सोचने के लिए वो मजबूर हो गए. Yes, who? The household, the people at the surgery. Yes, and then it was to enrich Tricky's blood. And look at there, it was to enrich means grow, enrich means grow, to grow the Tricky's blood. Grow Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. So look at the people at the surgery enjoying their life. Now they were having eggs at breakfast, then 2 glasses of wine at breakfast, and many more, several glasses of wine at meals. Why? Because the lady started sending all those just to enrich Tricky's blood. But here the people at the surgery enjoying. As the doctor knew very well, these things are not needed. These things were not needed. Yes, to the dog. Yes, his food must be cut down. He knew very well, and that's why he was not giving the dog anything. Yes, neither eggs nor wine. So then what happened? The people at the surgery enjoying the wine, they were drinking it. Yes, even the eggs also were eaten by them only. Yes, so here they were having just luxurious life there, enjoying the life there at the surgery. Then we could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge. Then she sent brandy. Okay, brandy for the dog. Okay, look at the things. 2 dozen eggs, then bottles of wine, and now brandy. Yes, she started sending brandy. So look at there, we could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution, on Tricky's constitution, on Tricky's condition, for Tricky's health, the lady started sending brandy. Brandy, yes, brandy. It is also kind of wine, but better one than the wine. Okay, wine से भी ज़्यादा better होती है. So here for a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and severely drunk. Yes. So here James Herriot frankly wrote here that what they did with the things sent by the lady. So here what happened, for few nights, कुछ रातों तक बढ़िया, the fine spirit was rolled around. The fine spirit means what? Here the dog Tricky. Yes, fine spirit. So here the doctor called the dog fine spirit. Why? Because now he was recovered, he was cured, and that's why here he called it the fine spirit. So here he says, for a few nights, कुछ रातों तक, the fine spirit was rolled around means he remained there at the surgery. They kept him there for some days. Yes. And then inhaled, okay, and reverently drunk. That means here with respect it was drunk. So this way the writer, Miss James Herriot, and the other people were enjoying the brandy. Okay, for a few nights the fine spirit was rolled around. Fine spirit, that means the dog was rolling around, and there the wine was inhaled, yes, taken in, and then reverently drunk, and that wine was drunk also. Yes. So this way the writer James Herriot and his people, means his attendant partners, they all were enjoying brandy. They started drinking themselves with respect. Yes, they started inhaling it while the fine spirit was just rolling around. Yes, fine spirit just roll around karta tha, lekin here they started drinking the brandy too. They were days of deep content, satisfaction. Okay, content means satisfaction. Okay, so here these days were of satisfaction, content. बढ़िया शांति से, बढ़िया कंटेंट से उनके दिन जा रहे थे. Why? Because at breakfast they were having eggs, then wine. Now they are started getting brandy, and that's why these days were the days of content. Yes, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. And that's why here he says, the doctor wrote here that these days were the days of satisfaction, content. Why? Because in the morning they were having eggs, in the midday wine, and at night brandy. So the days were really very, very, very satisfactory for those people at the surgery. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest, and here these things were called here temptation. Yes, temptation. Why these things were called here temptation? Why? Because they were getting these things every day. These things they were getting every day, and they were enjoying. And that's why here the doctor called them temptation. And this temptation compelled the doctor to keep the dog on as a permanent guest. परमानेंट गेस्ट, ऐसा उन्हें लगता था कि इसे हम परमानेंट गेस्ट रख दें ताकि ये सारी चीजें हमें डेली मिले. यस, सो लुक एट द व्हाट हैपेंस वेदर इट हैपेंड और नॉट. ओके, उस टेम्पटेशन का इफेक्ट उन पे होता है या नहीं होता है, ये देखेंगे हम सामने. इट वॉज अ टेम्पटेशन टू कीप ट्रिकी ऑन अ परमानेंट गेस्ट. ओके, सो दैट क्वेश्चन कैन बी देयर, व्हाट वाज द टेम्पटेशन. सो हियर 2 eggs in the morning, wines in the midday meal, and brandy at night. So look at that, it is given here. Starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. This is called here temptation, a temptation. Okay, just write there what is temptation. And then it tempted them to keep tricky on as a permanent guest, but here the doctor knew very well that I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. But the doctor James Herriot knew very well that Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering. Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering. And how could we say that? Because we can say that. Why? Because she was making a dozen calls in a day to get the recent bulletin. Yes. Besides, she was sending all those 2 dozen eggs, then bottles of wine, brandy. So this shows that she was suffering, and that's why after a fortnight 15 दिनों के बाद the writer felt compelled to phone. That means he was compelled to phone her. उसको फोन करने के लिए इन चीजों ने मजबूर कर दिया. एंड एट लास्ट आफ्टर अ फोर्टनाइट ही फोन्ड हर एंड टोल्ड हर दैट द डॉग हैड रिकवर्ड. आफ्टर अ फोर्टनाइट, 15 दिनों के बाद फिर उन्होंने उसको कॉल किया और बताया कि द डॉग वॉज रिकवर्ड, इट हैड रिकवर्ड एंड वॉज अवेटिंग collection. Awaiting collection means waiting to take away. Yes, so this way actually we know that at the fourth day it was cured. But the things they were getting from the lady tempted them to keep the dog for next 10 days, next 10 or 11 days we can say. But after a fortnight the writer felt compelled to phone her and tell her the real condition of the dog. So in the same or accordingly he made a call and told her that the dog was recovered and now was awaiting collection. So awaiting collection means waiting to take it away. Yes, so this way here at last after a fortnight he phoned her and told her to take it away. Yes, as it had been recovered. So then as soon as he made call, what happens? Let's see in our next video lecture. So guys, see you soon. Bye bye in our next video lecture. Good night.